welcome to the Great Debate Community Channel. And I'm your host today, John Petersen. This is a channel brought to you by Steve McCrae, and I always want to start out by thanking Steve for allowing me to do this.
John?
Yes?
Your audio from the website is going into OBS, and there's a huge echo.
I don't have OBS.
I don't know. Oh, you know what? My bad. Never mind. Apologize for interrupting. Entirely my fault. Sorry.
Okay. So at any rate, we're joined today, as you heard, by Nicholas Lamar Soutter, and I say all three of his names because that is how you find him on the web, on his YouTube channel, and best to find him if you're interested in his books or to go to the Humanist Codex, his website. We're also joined by Dr. Misha Griffith today. I've only been doing, maybe this is my fifth or sixth stream, and she's been a perennial or weekly favorite for a few of because of her breadth of knowledge. I love having her on. She was actually, I hope I'm not sharing things she doesn't want shared, but she was actually concerned that her being on too many times, might water down things. And I let her know that not a chance. Everybody loves seeing her. And we're also joined for the first time for my streams by Gray Skeptic, a pretty well-known YouTuber out there. And last but not least, we are joined today by our feature channel, Topic Thunder. And right up front, I want to mention, I just checked before I started sending links out for this. They were tweeting, Gray Skeptic and her were tweeting yesterday about she's pretty close to 200 subs. When I checked a little bit ago, she's right now at 193 subs. Please, those of you who are listening and those of you on the panel, if you're not already subbed to her, please go open another window and go sub to her now. Let's get her over 200 subs before this broadcast is over.
Do it right now.
Shouldn't be hard. Yeah. And that's a good. Well, and that's a good point that Nick always brings up is, hey, just open another window and get it done right now. If you wait till later, you're going to forget. So just do it right now.
Amen.
And Topic Thunder, yes, amen. Never get tired of hearing amen. We're going to start here and talk to Kelly, Topic Thunder, for a few minutes about her channel, and then we'll go into the title discussion. Now, Kelly, if you could just take a moment and share with us like what your background is, as far as your expertise or, whatever you want to share with us about your schooling or,
Okay. Sure. Or expertise or lack thereof. My expertise can be pretty much conceptualized by saying I'm just really interested in everything. I don't have a specific religious background to speak of. I've lived many places, so I've been around lots of people. I've lived in other countries as a child as well. So I'm interested in cultures, in history, and in the last few years have been sort of, really brought into the skeptic community through YouTube and then through Twitter. And I suppose I'm taking on a more, I don't want to say activist because I'm not as active as I could possibly be, but in the sort of the freedom from religion and things like that, sort of aspect to it, but just generally the questions of our existence and things like that. So my channel is going to be a mixture of lots of different things, definitely humanist in its sort of basis, but I'm interested in mental health, for the secular and religious, history. I'm a big fan of Greek mythology. Please don't question me on it, Misha. I've basically just got a thirst for knowledge. I wasn't able to receive any of my secondary school education here, so that would be your version of high school. So from around about age 11 or 12 up to 16 here in the UK. So I felt I missed out a lot on that sort of thing. So I'm sort of catching up as an almost 37-year-old. So bear in mind that obviously I'm among distinguished guests here. So just understand that obviously I'm learning a lot of these things for the first time and just finding them very interesting. And the best way sometimes to learn is to really get involved and to speak on things rather than just having your head in a book all the time. So my channel is basically that, me awakening to ideas and talking about them. I'll get things wrong, but one thing you'll find hopefully with my channel is that I will always question myself, and I don't know all the right answers, but I do like to ask the questions. That's going to be my little sort of caption.
Well, and that's always a good tack to take, is ask questions and seek answers.
Do we have a link for that channel?
Oh, that's a good point.
Maybe put it in the live. People have been asking, or put it here, and I'll copy it to the live chat. But people in the live chat are asking, and I can't. I don't have it, so I'll put it in the group chat, and I will copy it over.
Yeah. Yes. If you can go to YouTube, just type in Topic Thunder. And what will happen is, and this is a good, thank you for bringing this up, Nick. Anybody that's out there, if you type in Topic Thunder into the YouTube search engine, it is going to come back with, hey, you don't know what you're talking about. Here's a bunch of stuff about Tropic Thunder. Okay. And then you have to click on no, I meant Topic Thunder. And then her website will be or her YouTube channel will be the first thing to come up.
Yes.
But I do apologize, Nick, but right, absolutely. I am, as I have mentioned in the past, I am about as technologically advanced as an abacus. So,
hey, it works.
If you could locate it and put it in chat, I'd very much appreciate it. And so, what I was going to ask you next is, Kelly, is what is it that made you decide to become a YouTuber? And is there, any YouTubers who inspired you to do such?
Well, I thought YouTube was this great. It's a creative outlet. I have a little bit of history in performing arts and things like that. So I've got a little bit of a show person in me. So the idea of writing for it and creating something and presenting it, hopefully in a light-hearted comedic fashion, despite the sort of heaviness of some of the subjects, appealed to me. And of course, to learn things is always a great thing, but to be able to learn it so that then you can then share it to other people, you've got that extra push to want to get it right and to want to learn it. And to basically express myself, I suppose. And I was inspired by people like definitely Cosmic Skeptic. I know probably people are tired of hearing me say how much he's basically the main reason I got started. But then, of course, I got connected with, other skeptic channels, Rachel Oates, Holy Kool-Aid, GM Skeptic, Shannon Q, who all have their own sort of niches and ways of talking about things. And they just sort of opened up this sort of world that I didn't even know was there. I was using YouTube for sort of sewing DIY videos and how to, I think you Americans call it spackle a wall and things like that. So just general home stuff and beauty tips and stuff like that. And I didn't realize there was this sort of section that was about activism and about, spreading this sort of humanist secular message. And I thought, wow, great. But my intention was initially to just do it for myself, to prove to myself that I could, sort of develop an understanding of something and then conceptualize it in my own words. And share it. And I thought initially a couple of people might watch and that'd be lovely. And then it started to gather some steam, and I've been included in this wonderful community, and we're all so different from one another, but we share very similar values, I found. So it's been pretty life-changing, actually. So yeah, I'm just glad to be part of it. What I don't want to do is obviously muddy the waters by my inexperience, but that's why I always say, I'm wanting to learn. I'm not, on a set ideology or anything like that. So hopefully that comes across.
And then, if you would, and you touched on this at the beginning a bit, but give us a description of your content and what any goals that you might have, in putting your content out.
And may I be the first, actually, before you do that, to congratulate you on now having more than 200 subs.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah! All right.
I hope after the stream that they don't regret it and go back, but they're well within their rights to do so. So, I apologize in advance.
Thank you, live chat. You guys are awesome. That didn't take long off. So
John, you said you're not technically minded, but I can't even I don't even know how to get the live chat up. So I'm sorry for everyone. I find that in these things, I do like to concentrate on what I'm saying. And I feel like if I'm going to keep looking over to the live chat, I might miss something. So it's not me being mean. I just want to really concentrate on sort of what I'm saying. So hello to everybody in the live chat.
Yeah, you and me can commiserate on that, because I typically during a stream, I might get over the live chat maybe 2 or 3 times, when I can find a minute. But I am definitely not one of these people that can have several windows open and, I'll just get distracted. But anyway, live chat, next stop, 1,000 subs. So, don't stop just because we went over 200. Last question for you, Kelly, actually, we interrupted you with the good news.
Oh, sorry, yes. I'll be as succinct as I can. Initially, when I started, I did want to speak about atheism, sort of all the philosophical questions regarding that, mental health, as I feel I've got sort of a little bit to say, just from an anecdotal, personal side, but interested in the sort of psychology of that. I've got a bit of Greek gods thrown in there just for fun. But essentially, it'll be, human nature in different aspects. And I might even dip into science when I become more learned on the matter. So you'll get a plethora of different subjects, hopefully. But you must understand that I do have a pretty dry British sense of humour. So just be prepared for that. But it'll grow. I found a love of philosophy that I didn't even know I had before I started the channel. And that's sort of gathered steam in terms of my content, so that will be part of it as well, and it'll keep happening, and the more I learn, the more I'll add, I'm sure.
And speaking of your British wit, there was a particular, and we don't have to go into this, but there was a particular video you put out maybe a month ago or more, could have been as many as 2 months ago, about a particular skincare regimen that people were using that may, have something to do with, I don't know how to put this.
John, I can't thank you enough for bringing this up. It'll certainly, give what I have to say tonight that extra seriousness by bringing yes. Well, to be fair, it was a very fascinating experience. Again, I've learned something. It was basically a young British woman who not only consumed and imbibed sperm, but also used it in her skincare. And it does actually have quite a lot of benefits. But what was funny is it was a video that sort of went viral about it, is that she didn't actually get the volume of fluids from her partner. It was from several male friends. So there's much comedy to be had regarding this story, and I couldn't help but poke a little bit of fun. But I loved the aspect that there's actually some medical truth to it in a sense. You'd have to stretch it a bit far. Likely you could find the same medical, sort of attributes that come with it in other substances. But yes, I thought, why not?
Yeah. Maybe an unfortunate turn of a phrase there at the end.
That thought crossed my mind. Yes.
The word before with it, but anyway, I'm sorry to put you on the spot on that, but I was laughing for days after that. And so again, the name of her channel, Topic Thunder. Nick has put a link in the live chat. Thank you so much, live chat, for getting her over 200 subs, and don't stop there. Real quick, just any other platforms you're on that you want people to know about, Kelly?
I'm on Twitter at Topic Thunder 1. My humor in regards to my videos, I try to be quite concise and clear. A friend of mine said I sounded like Mary Poppins, so Mary Poppins of atheism. I don't know if that's even a thing, but my wit on Twitter will be somewhat, and I tend to swear a little bit more on there, especially when there's a story of something that really disgusts me. So I do warn you that the profanity does come out occasionally, but you basically get all the aspects of my personality, whether on YouTube or Twitter. Those are the main ones, I think, as they're great for conversations and things like that. So, all
right. So thank you, Kelly, for being here. We hope to have you on again as a panelist. I'm trying to do a stream once a weekish, 3 to 4 times a month. And
let's see how well I do this one first.
Yeah, and some months it might be 5. And then, so before we go into the discussion, I just want to say shout out to Christy Santiago in the chat. We exchanged a few posts. Christy Santiago will be the feature channel next week with her channel Leah. And I'm going to get this wrong. Tell me if it's right. League of Extraordinary Atheist Humanists. Say that again, Grace Skeptic.
It's the League of Extraordinary Atheists for Humanism. You're right. Yep. And hi, Christy. Sorry, okay. I can't be in the live chat either. I'm on my phone. I can only do one thing.
And now wait a minute. And here's the thing. Again, I'm an old man and I'm addled. Grace Skeptic, are you the other half of Leah?
Yeah. I started Leah, and then Christy's too amazing to leave out of it. So I also.
Okay, and we're doing it 2 p.m. Eastern today because Kelly is in England, so we wanted to not have her have to be here at 3 in the morning her time. We can set next week up for whatever time is convenient for you, Mac, because I would like you to be here with Christy. So, and then there's again my addled old brain making a connection, in the moment. Oh, wait a minute. That's right. That's why Grace Skeptic looks so familiar to me, because he is the other half of Leah. So all right. Let's go into the discussion. As you see from the title, is imposed female subservience a religious right? And let's, pay particular attention to imposed, because it was suggested to me, once I put the title out there, well, if it's self-imposed, then that's not a problem. And of course, if a female chooses to be subservient of her own free will with no coercion applied to her, well, there certainly are some women out there that would choose such. But if it's an imposition on them, and that is what we want to talk about here. There's a particular legal case that was recently in the news that Kelly and Misha are going to start the discussion out talking about. And just to throw a few things else out there that we can touch on throughout the broadcast. There was also a Canadian case regarding hijabs that was in the news as of late. And related to that, there was and I have the links here available if we want to talk about this later, where a young lady was killed by her father for not wanting to wear her hijab. Also, this topic lends itself to perhaps bring up the NIFB and Stephen Anderson's heinous belief that marriage is implied consent and that there's no such thing as spousal rape, among the other horrible things that this man espouses. So Kelly, take a moment and lay the groundwork of that case for us. And if you and Misha would start us out here, getting this conversation going.
Certainly. Well, John, as you may remember from our discussions regarding this, I did tweet out regarding a US case involving FGM, or female genital mutilation. where the defense had planned to use religious freedoms as a defense. Pardon me, I'm not sort of too au fait with all the legal terms, especially when it comes to American law and constitutional law and federal law and things like that. So forgive me if I make a faux pas. But this case actually, I believe, was settled late last year. So it's a few months old, but it's an interesting. So it was doing the rounds on Twitter, basically. But it's important to say that in the specific case, the actual defense was not the reason the actual case got thrown out, which would have been very interesting, and possibly, if it had worked, if it had been as a result of religious rights and freedoms and things like that, then we could imagine this happening a lot, because both in the US and the UK, FGM victims range in the thousands, and in fact in the UK close to 100,000 at the last check, if my data is correct. So we need to just sort of make it noted that although that was a defense used, it wasn't the reason the case was thrown out. It was all to do with an actual constitutional issue regarding the FGM law being put into place in the first place. So if anything, it is technically now making it look like it's easier to get away with this sort of thing. The people involved, I'll just run through the details very, very quickly, was a female doctor, although there were several doctors involved by the data I've got, on girls from age 7 years to 13 years in Michigan and the surrounding areas. So they were going to different states and counties and things like that. So they were crossing borders, as it were, to get around the actual illegal aspect of this, because it is illegal in certain states, although there are a lot where it isn't. So essentially,
I just was going to interject here and say, yes, when I did some research on this, I was flabbergasted to find that only about half the states here have a law against it, which I just couldn't believe.
It's crazy, and I'm unfortunately, it's not the first time I've actually been shocked by what's legal in America, even in the more liberal states. Sorry, that sounds awful, but in terms of child marriage and the ages, in terms of that, you'd be hard pressed to say to somebody, oh, blah blah blah, you can get married, and they'll think of a completely different country, and I'll say, no, it's the US. So it is unfortunate. The actual case was dismissed because, and I'll be brief, it was ruled that Congress lacked authority under the Commerce Clause of the US Constitution to adopt the 1996 law, in that it was federal law that FGM was not allowed, and that the power to outlaw FGM lay with individual states. And he's quoted Judge Friedman, as despicable as this practice may be, it is essentially a criminal assault. Congress had overstepped its bounds by legislating to prohibit FGM, as it had no demonstrated effect on interstate commerce. So it's a real blow, obviously, to FGM victims. And of course, these procedures done by these particular people are said to number over at least 100 girls. So this is a problem, and it like I said, they didn't, although they were planning to use the defense of religious freedom, religious rights, that wasn't what happened. It's interesting to note, however, that the people involved did belong to a small Muslim community known as the, I'm probably going to get this wrong, the Dawood Bohra community, who are a sort of, not a sect, but are sort of in connection with the Indian Shia Muslims. So it's not basically a bunch of secular people doing this. So there is a religious connection. It's that, this particular case, that didn't actually fly. The UK case, again, I'll go really briefly, is quite interesting. This was actually the woman, the mother, was sentenced in February, so this is fairly recent. She was jailed for 11 years for performing this action on a 3-year-old. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Yes, it was 3-year-old. She was of Ugandan descent and her partner Afghanian descent, but they were UK citizens. And she did actually have aspects of witchcraft in terms of the paraphernalia that was actually found in the house when the couple were actually out on bail. So whilst it's not connected necessarily to Islam or any of the Abrahamic religions, I beg your pardon, there is a connection to a cultural and sort of spiritual aspect. She did actually state initially that the child had fallen onto a kitchen cupboard trying to reach for a biscuit, I believe, and she wasn't wearing underwear at the time. It's obviously, a story to cover herself, but that was her defense as to how she received the injury. It was then obvious to any doctors that looked at her that it'd actually been a scalpel or a surgical instrument that had been used. But when they found all the sort of occult paraphernalia, as it were, spells were found against the people involved with the case. So the police involved, the people prosecuting, their names were tied into all this sort of, I think they were tongues, cows' tongues, I think, wrapped with the names of these people. So we're not talking, again, secular people here. So although they don't mention the Abrahamic religions in particular, because a lot of people do associate FGM with specifically Muslim countries, it's most prevalent in North Africa. And so there is a religious connection to it. Some people say cultural, but there's it depending on where you go, it's either on par, more cultural in terms of wanting to conform to specific communities and wanting to go through it in that sense. And then others, supposedly, it's not religiously sanctioned in most of the world's major religions, but it does depend on where you go. And unfortunately, it is still quite prevalent. So,
well, and when I read some on it, and the actual figure escapes me now, but you talked about how many of these procedures, and boy, that's a sanitary term for me to use about this, but how many take place in England. I believe it was here in the United States, tens of thousands, if not 100,000 of these take place on a yearly basis. I mean, and that also flabbergasted me. Dr. Misha, weigh in on this. Why is it you think that our Supreme Court was or the courts were so cowardly on this?
First of all, I want to say Kelly did a great job of presenting all this material. I'm following along as you're doing it at certain articles that were written about it. So you did an excellent job also by placing it in terms of both a cultural position and in terms of a religious position. Mm-hmm. I think the Supreme Court probably, I don't know what the evidence was that they were looking at. That's my big concern. Were they looking at, some of the scientific studies, or were they depending on anecdotal evidence? If they were depending on anecdotal evidence, it's very easy to assume this is a religious sort of situation. Mm-hmm. And they might not have wanted to weigh in on any sort of religious ideals. I mean, that's kind of what they're made up by now. So that conservative majority is very much looking at religion as being a groundwork of society, not just something that people believe, but actually a basis for society. A lot of the other stuff that I have read about FGM is that there is a religious context in that certain small sects believe it should be done. And there is a group of studies actually out of Africa that say that basically the people believe that it is mandated by the religion. And this is basically not just Muslim, but also Christian. So it's both sides of that specter. But most importantly, And this has played out for me anecdotally because I interviewed a couple years back one of the members of the Uganda House of Representatives. Mm-hmm. And she is fighting against FGM very strongly because in Africa, in Uganda, mm-hmm. it is a cultural thing. Mm-hmm. She basically explained that women were willing to undergo it not just because it was a religious passage, but mainly because they were afraid they wouldn't get a husband without it. That they were trying to conform to this age-old societal norm, and it was costing people their lives because in Uganda they weren't doing this, generally speaking, under sanitary conditions. I mean, she talked about rusty razor blades and pieces of glass as the objects to do this, and of course without any grounding in the ideas of germ theory. So yeah, it was totally horrified me listening to her stories and how she was working in the Uganda Congress to try to overthrow this.
Yeah. It's really interesting to note that because of its prevalence,
right.
It's one of those things that you can sort of sometimes, obviously it's not something nice to think about or talk about, but often people will like to pigeonhole a particular cultural practice with a particular religion and sort of state that they're the only ones who do it. There is a very small amount of Christian groups that will do it in Africa, mainly for the idea behind sort of sexual purity before marriage, like you stated. They go about it in several rather alarming ways. And although it's not sort of mentioned in things like the Torah and the Gospels and stuff like that, there's a slight mention about, I think, in one of the Hadiths where Muhammad sanctions it as long as the cutting isn't too severe. I'm not sure of the sort of nuance of that particular section. But there are some Sunni Muslims, I beg your pardon, they do legitimize it because of that particular hadith. But there's a very interesting thing I found regarding a very specific, so it's only in terms of the Jewish, obviously people know about male circumcision, which I don't agree with either, cultural or religious otherwise. And it's a very small sect that are actually in Ethiopia, again, called the Falashas or Beta Israel, and they practice female genital surgery. But they are very, very small, and they do follow a more sort of archaic version of Judaism. So it's worth noting that not all people of Jewish faith sanction it, but it's worldwide. It's banned, I believe, in 59 countries. There's international treaties covering the fact that this is an awful practice. What worries me, I suppose, is in the sense of it happening within the States, the UK, Germany has a big problem with it as well. So as immigration obviously is a sort of an ongoing thing in the world, you are going to have these cultural practices, sort of coming to the forefront. And like you said, there's sort of the aspects of the real sort of heartbreaking stories of girls standing in rivers being cut and then getting infections from the river water, right to ones that are done under a medical supervision, which are supposedly cleaner, more safe. It doesn't matter. It's still not required. There's no health benefits. The World Health Organization, I believe, states, quite fervently on their website, there is zero to be had. It's particularly about sexual purity, which has obviously Christian aspects to it and things like that. So what I'm basically saying is that it's not happening largely in secular communities. There's a cultural aspect, but certainly a religious aspect. And what is conformity if not a sort of a benchmark of religious practices as well? But what we have to do is to make sure that. So sorry, John, go ahead.
No, I just that what you just said now just gave me an opportunity to get in there with something I wanted to point out that Dr. Misha was talking. You talk about conformity. You talk about conformity, and make no mistake about it. Women who, like she alluded to, who feel obligated because of their, religious and cultural, framework that they live in. That is a form of coercion. Okay, even though they may decide themselves they want to take part in this ceremony or procedure or horrible mutilation is what it actually is. Make no mistake about it, because of where they're growing up and how they're growing up and how that is, fed to them from the, moment that they become cognizant, that is an insidious form of coercion. And so they definitely are, in not most cases, not making this decision of their own free will.
Absolutely not. And when I thought on it a while, I do regard male circumcision as something unnecessary. As far as I know, that has no medical benefits, as far as I know. But the fact that most circumcisions, I understand, are done when the baby boy is a baby. These can take place right up until sort of prepubescent times. So we're talking not only a procedure that is wholly unnecessary and, like you said, is a form of sort of subjugation via conformity, but they are old enough to say, to realize that they are being sort of held down and made to do something. They may have their trust in their parents and their elders and people around them want to conform, but they are old enough and, like you said, sort of cognizant enough for it to do lasting damage, not only physically but mentally, and also exactly. And I'm sorry to go into such specifics, but we often hear of FGM being regarding the clitoral area. But there are 4 different types, and they include almost the sealing of the vaginal canal. Sorry, I'm not I'm not a doctor, so but everything from incising, piercing, and scraping to make it basically too painful to consider sex before marriage. How they managed, I don't know whether they undo stitches or do something later so that sex within the marriage can be at least enjoyed or endured. Who knows to say that they don't then go to endure sexual, their sexual experiences in a great deal of pain as they go on through their lives, because they're perhaps used to it. They wouldn't know to think pain isn't sex isn't painful. I'm sorry. So it's far more insidious than at first you think. I mean, it's bad enough cutting somebody's clitoris off, but it's it goes further than that.
Well, it's also doing major damage very often to the urinary tract.
Yes.
As in sealing up, it could conceivably seal up the woman's urethra, or pass infection into the bladder and turn that into a really horrible situation for the rest of this young lady's life. I mean, forget about pain during sex. We're talking about problems with incontinence, that sort of thing, that would last a lifetime.
Yeah. Hey,
but one thing I wanted to bring up to add on to what Kelly is saying is that legally we can start banning this all throughout the United States, Great Britain, Germany, the industrialized, the developed world, but no one's going to stop, or it is almost impossible to stop FGM tourism. This is an insidious practice where they take young girls, young girls 5, 6, 7, and say, let's go visit grandma in India, in sub-Saharan Africa. And then they get there, and this procedure is done in a different country. Absolutely. And they come back scarred for life.
It's now...
that is great.
Sorry, John, go ahead.
I was just going to take this opportunity to, and you can finish your thought there. I'd like to get Nick and Mac to weigh in on this after Kelly makes her point. Nick did let me know before that he might get called away at a moment's notice, so I want to get the 2 of them in on this. But go ahead, Kelly, and finish your point there, and then we'll let the gentleman join in.
Absolutely, yes. It's interesting to note that although the UK FGM has been deemed illegal since 1985, although the legislation and the wording has changed somewhat over the years,
Nope. She's frozen up.
Kelly, come back.
I wasn't sure if that was me or.
No. Excellent. You're back.
Yeah, you kind of roboted there for like 10 or 15 seconds.
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I back now?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Well, I'll try to be brief. I know I can prattle on a little bit, but yes. So this is a landmark case in the UK. It's basically opened up the sphere of understanding about this. So there is more money going into educational materials, not only here in the UK, but actually being sent abroad to North African destinations in regards to the cultural practices, why they're not necessary, and so on and so forth. I think something like £15 million has been put into the sort of kitty to help spread awareness about this, because there, like you said, there is a problem. They actually call it the cutting season, and it's actually not only illegal for FGM to happen in this country, but also to transport children under that guise, and to then obviously return with them. So it is happening, but slowly. I mean, it's taken sort of 30 years for this landmark case to be brought. So it's happening slowly, but it's basically us being able to say, look, cultural or otherwise, you're harming children. This is child abuse at its most basic, if anything else. So, it's important to say that some things are being done, but awareness is definitely key. The fact that it's not medically necessary, and people are trying to go in and out of the law. They know it's illegal, and they're still trying to do it anyway. So just opening up people's eyes and minds to it, really.
And Nick and Mac, if you could, weigh in on this portion of the discussion, from your perspectives.
I've been writing down a whole bunch of notes on stuff I wanted to say, and then of course I misplaced the notes, so I only have half of what, and I'll try to be reasonably brief, but I had some thoughts. As to the World Health Organization, the UN, says it is not medically necessary, provides no medical benefits, and has, so it's universally condemned. In the United States, there are actually two reasons, because conservatives, yes, do lean towards religion, but they also lean towards sort of states' rights, and they talk about, and so what they will often do is, and they can use those interchangeably. So if it's a religious issue, but they know that they'll lose on the religious fronts, they'll go to states' rights, and if it's a states' rights issue, but they know they'll lose there, they go to religion. So it's not to say that they're necessarily being honest about it, but the argument that they made, and in this case it doesn't work, but it can work, is, hey, we are a republic, not a democracy, and what that means is that the states get to choose, and that's actually not really true. But at any rate, in this case, I can see one thing, which is, I guess it was banned under the Commerce Clause.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How that happened. But I am one for, well, I think it should be banned immediately. I think it should have been banned quite some time ago. And in fact, I think it should be banned for both males and females, because it's the same thing. Now, with males, there used to be a medical benefit. There actually was a medical benefit, which is it kept the penis cleaner. It was easier to clean, and especially if you're Jewish and wandering you've escaped from Egypt and you're going to wander the desert for 40 years, it may have some practical benefits. But it's long since, hygiene has reached the point where that benefit does not exist anymore. It's also the most sensitive part of the penis that's actually being cut off, which is something most people don't understand, but it actually is. Now, in female genital mutilation, it's a step further. So for male circumcision, which is mutilation, they cut off the tip of the penis. It's the most sensitive part, so males do lose some of the pleasure of sex. Cutting off the clitoris is much more tantamount, really, to cutting off the entire penis. So it's a step further. So using the same saying, it's what is it? Circumcision. It's significantly a step further. But they should both be banned, and entirely for the same reasons. But let's understand that there is a significant difference. I have a problem. I think John is right to point out that even if people consent to this, if their culture is such that it's forcing them to, in one way or another, to sort of think that way, that is coercion. The problem is it's very difficult to draw the lines there, and without you imposing your cultural values. I, for one, am very much against France's banning the burqa. I was and still am against that. I understand why they did it, and it's for that exact argument, and it makes some sense because, you sit there and you say, well, how can any woman who has grown up in this culture make their own free will? Okay, or make their own free decision based on their own free decision about the burqa, considering how much they've either, whatever you want to call it, brainwashed or whatever. But then again, now I am imposing my values on that. And I think there are people who find great comfort in a number of these roles. So you have to be very careful on imposing your values on them. And I think what you have to do is try to win in the marketplace of free ideas. And that means the burqa has to be allowed, in my opinion. But
can I touch on that real quick before you move on, Nick?
Please.
Because they were doing the same thing in Sri Lanka recently after their those extremist attacks. And one thing that I really wanted to point out with this is when you ban the burqa, or when you ban the jobs, sorry, I didn't mean to do vertical video. I was a moral monster there for a second. So, but when this is fueled by a religious belief, when women have to cover their faces before they go outside, how many women then just can't go outside? How many are you just trapping at that point? It's, I think it's a really racist thing to do, kind of at its base, but also you're entrapping so many people who won't just be like, oh, okay, well, I guess I can or have to take it off now. And,
well, I think that's actually an excellent point. I hadn't really considered even, but I think, and it also drives the conversation underground. If nobody is wearing the burqa, and if you don't see it, and you've driven the entire practice underground, then how can it be challenged? How can people? And that's another reason why, by the way, I'm for the KKK going out and doing their rallies. And one reason is I know who they are now. I can see them and I can talk about them, and I can sit there and say, those are the assholes. And if you don't give them that right, and if you deny them and you say that they cannot go out, even if they're hidden and all this other, then we cannot engage on the topic. It's done. And so it just festers.
But France, unlike the United States, even though in their constitutions, their various constitutions have guaranteed freedom of religion, they have been a nation that has tried to control their culture in a way that in America we would find that horrifying. In that they want to make it a very homogenous sort of culture, especially when it comes to Roman Catholicism, even though most French people are not Catholic anymore, but they do want to have this homogeneity of French culture. And so banning the burqa is not anti-religious. It is pro-French or pro-French culture.
Oh,
and of course, I know that the white nationalists use that line, oh, we don't hate black people.
You knew where
we
I was going
love
with that, yes.
white people. Yes, exactly. So, yeah, it's an interesting argument. As far as the burqa, I have many Muslim students in my classes. I have many young women who wear the burqa. And in fact, if I can tell one story, I often give them a chance to do extra credit. And one of my extra credit assignments used to be a photo safari, having them go around Washington, D.C. and take photos of buildings. And I had to stop doing that because one of my young Muslim ladies said, my dad won't let me do that because he doesn't want me in my hijab out wandering around DC taking pictures of buildings. This is something I never thought of. But, that's something that we have to consider, that these young women, whether they feel like they need to conform to a family expectation, whether they are proud of stating who they are, and it's part of their identity. Either way, I think we have to leave it up to them.
Well, and I wanted to address actually one other thing, slightly changing the topic, but we'd also talked about, so what I think what needs to happen is it absolutely has to be illegal, and it has to be illegal at the federal level. That was another argument they made, that yes, it is a crime, but it's a local crime. It's not it's a crime against a citizen of this country. So for the same reason that we ostensibly have age limitations on when you can get married. I think the youngest I know of is 12, and that had come up earlier, that with parental consent, a girl can be married at the age of 12. But the consent exists for a reason, and the ability of the state, recognized ability of the state to force medical treatment on a child if now there is limits, and the state has a huge burden, but the state can technically and has overcome a burden where they say, listen, I know you're a Jehovah's Witness, but if your child does not get this cancer treatment, they will die. If they get this cancer treatment, the chances are excellent that they will survive, and we are imposing that on you. I still have a hard time swallowing that, but I am nonetheless for it. Now, for those same reasons, one of the things that you have to do, I think, is ban it across the board at the federal level immediately, because there is no set of circumstances under which the male or female is medically necessary and appropriate. The second thing is, if Americans conspire to take another American citizen at any age out of the country to perform the procedure, that is conspiracy. That is conspiracy to commit harm against an American citizen. And I think as soon as they come back, they should be prosecuted for it. So I think there are ways to do it. It's unfortunate that it's not considered. I mean, and I will say this: if it had been reversed, and if they were doing the true male equivalent, which is completely cutting off the penis, my guess is it would have been illegal 5 years before the signing of the Declaration of Independence. So I'd like to see some parity on how seriously we treat the issue.
Pardon my vulgarity, but sort of dicks take precedent then, I suppose, in terms of, I know exactly what you mean. It does seem that way, and
now we're back on subject.
Yeah, exactly. So I always bring it down, don't I? I'm quite vulgar. I do apologise, but it does seem that way, and obviously the idea of bodily autonomy, obviously for both male and female children or otherwise. In a country that should be a shining light for the equality of genders, people who do practice, different religions, and have cultural aspects that they bring to the US to make this such an amazing melting pot. It does worry me a little bit that there is, even for your own citizens, no matter what sort of ethnic background they have, that women in particular in certain states, Alabama, are losing a lot of that, sort of a lot of those rights. So if they don't sort of really care about adults and their bodily autonomy and the legalities they hold as an individual and as a citizen of the country, then I don't know how long it's going to take for this federal action in terms of children, especially when there is a religious freedom aspect to it. So it might take a while, and unfortunately, a lot of young girls are going to suffer for that, and it shouldn't be happening. Certainly in the West, it shouldn't be happening anywhere.
Let me just jump in and say that there's something about your accent that makes your vulgarity quite palatable.
That's a fair point. I was trying to figure out why, and that's it. Yeah. You're right.
Right, and I also want to go to Gray Skeptic. Actually, Kelly requested that Mac join us today, and I feel like he hasn't gotten in too much. Is there anything you'd like to touch base on, Mac, that from what you've heard so far?
There's a little bit. Thanks for giving me a chance here.
Sorry.
Also, thank you, Kelly, for asking for me to be on. My pleasure to be in here with you. But a few things that I wanted to point out real quick, because I was trying to look up a couple things as you were talking. One of your sources, your stories that you were referring to, that was from Uganda, right?
No, the individual was a British citizen, as far as I understand it, but she was she hailed from Uganda, yes, and her partner was from Ghana. So they didn't travel. This occurred within the UK. The actual action, the FGM was the procedure was done in the UK.
Okay. And obviously that's a problem all on its own, and it should be banned, like in Western countries, I think, because I think we are civilized enough to know better. But I wanted to point out something interesting that I saw is that Uganda is actually it only affects about 1% of the population, according to Wikipedia. Like only about 1% of the population subscribes to it. There are other countries though, like Gambia, like over 70% ascribe to it, like from 0 to 14 ages. And then there were about 10 other countries, and I can't remember now because I can only have one thing up at a time on my phone that were closer to 100%. There are many other countries, but Uganda actually was like pulled much lower than almost any other country that ascribes to it at all, which I think still says something that it's that much of an issue with just 1% of the population ascribing to it. That they feel like they need to bring it up, not just because it happened in the UK, but because she's from there. I think that says something, and I really feel bad for the people who live in the other countries where it's much more culturally acceptable.
Well, it's difficult to actually gauge, Mac, I'm afraid, because a lot of the times, one of the main reasons she was actually caught, or rather, the issue was in this particular case was found out was because the young child was bleeding profusely from her wound. There's no other reason to call it anything else, and so was obviously taken to a medical professional. They obviously realized what was going on. So we only know about it because she sought medical attention. A lot of the time these things are done sometimes under a medical professional, but usually a family friend or somebody involved who has done the practice before. But there's all sorts of different ways they use to actually perform it, and sometimes they actually cauterize the wound as well. So sometimes it's not known until the child is much later, when they become obviously aware of other people around them who haven't had this procedure. Because if it's a cultural norm, you're just going to go on throughout your life thinking most people do it, or unless you're told specifically it's for your culture, for your religion, or whatever the reasons behind it. But you can go. Some girls have gone many years without realizing that it was actually wrong, which is awful. So the numbers are difficult, to actually track. How many people have actually, undergone this procedure?
And that's a fair point, and I agree with it. A few other things I wanted to point out real quick is just kind of like my own thoughts on this, how it pertains to religion and kind of women's rights. Is just it really kind of follows the guidelines of. I feel like women are just property, right? If you rape a woman in the Old Testament times, then you break it, you buy it, you give the father so many pieces of silver, and then you own that thing you broke, right? And they kind of do the same thing now. And I don't know a whole lot about this topic, but you said there's 4 different kinds of FGM. So I don't know how many of those types sew it back shut. But again, you want something that's not broken before you buy it. And I think it's really just degrading to women in general, not only to their physical health or their mental health, but just their rights in general. And the second point that I wanted to make was just kind of following along with Nicholas, what he had said, is the best way to combat this, I think, is through education. We need to join forces with other nations, like through the United Nations. We need to unite with nations, United Nations, and we really need to push for better education. We really need to push for getting this information out there to defeat it with just the argument, because we really don't want to. Because I'm not saying anyone is pushing for like us going in and regime changing or changing everyone's, all these other cultures' laws, but just making the point that the best way to go about it is just finding the best route of how to educate these people.
Definitely.
Well, we've got one of the articles I looked up while researching this was out of Nairobi, Kenya, the School of Nursing Sciences for the Kenyatta National Hospital and a group of other people. They are teaching midwives who do the bulk of the work as far as women in pregnancy, teaching midwives how to understand the problem and trying to get rid of FGM. So yeah, education very much part of the whole. Oh, they got before training. They've got a chart on it. Before training, they had like 65% of people agreed that it was a good idea. After training, 95, almost 96% of the people agreed that this was a bad idea.
I'm going to interrupt real quick, just because we got a super chat, so I just wanted to bring that up, because I figure I know John can't be looking at the live chat because he's doing the moderation, and two things at once is just a little too much. So I happen to catch up on it. So it's Biblical History Skeptics, who I know, a really good guy, very very honest, and he and I've been in a couple of chats. It's $5. It's $5. Topic Thunder. I like your videos, but I definitely want to talk. For a second I thought I lost her. I want to talk, but I definitely want to talk about some biblical issues with her sometime. I am an agnostic biblical nerd, so which he's good. So give him the time of day, because he's good. He's worth chatting with.
Do you know, I put this out on Twitter the other day that one of my very earliest videos, there was a set of two regarding I'm an atheist, why you can't change my mind sort of thing. It was a bit of a play on a sort of title. It didn't mean that I was closed-minded. I was just sort of like stating the very strong reasons I felt this in such a way. And my first one did regard some aspects of biblical narrative that I took, which are well known, so I'm not the first person to use them, which I've since become more knowledgeable on them. But I asked my followers, and I said, should I sort of keep that up? And they said, yeah, just sort of like seeing your journey and things like that. So there's some aspects that there's room for nuance within the Bible, like you wouldn't believe. So now I find I'm concentrating more on sort of historical inaccuracies and things like that. When it comes to the Bible, I'm not really that centered on the Bible as an idea of the idea for a first mover or that sort of thing. I'm right back at the beginning, but the Bible is way ahead. So I'm of the mind that you prove to me that there was a creator, then we'll go from there, sort of thing. So the Bible's a little bit of a sort of like a bit of a small matter to me, but I did. I'm sure he's got plenty to say. But I will say that a lot of the aspects in that video are in regards to not necessarily things from the Bible itself, but people like Saint Augustine, who commented in such a way in regards to things like sex and women and things like that. So the idea now is I want to make sure I'm clear who I'm quoting and things like that, just for clarity. I'm not trying to trip anybody up on my argument or anything like that. So just bear in mind I'm learning this,
And as far as getting together with Chris, Biblical History Skeptics, we can make that work on this channel, or Chris is often in Steve's Hangouts, and we can get you guys together one way or the other, on Steve's channel or on this channel, and I think that would be a wonderful thing to do. I want to take a little turn in the conversation off of something that Mac brought up, unless anybody wants to put a pin in what Mac was talking about. Is there anything you wanted to say real quick before we turn elsewhere?
I think it should be a human right, a violation of human rights. I did want to say that, just because he was talking about, it should be a human rights violation. Period.
It is incredibly.
Now, what Max? Oh, go ahead. And that's why I don't understand why the courts didn't take the opportunity to, on a constitutional basis, as Nick said earlier, just make a federal case out of it and
religious freedom.
Now, what Mac had said, he had mentioned about something that made me think of Stephen Anderson and the NFIB and the whole idea of the. Go ahead. No, you.
I was saying I'm sorry that I made you think of Stephen Anderson.
Well, but my bad memory. I can't remember the specific comment you made, but it made me decide that maybe we should turn to Christianity a little bit and talk about the NIFB and specifically Stephen Anderson has clearly stated that marriage means consent for life. In his eyes, there is no such thing as spousal rape. And the broader issue of people in Christianity who use scripture to put forward the idea that women should be subservient and that they are essentially second-class citizens within Christianity. And whoever wants to jump in on that first, please do.
Oh.
Yeah, that's just heavy sigh. Yeah.
Well,
I only have about 10 or 15 more minutes, just so you guys know. And then I need to get going.
Okay.
I got family things today.
There's been John earlier, in the live chat and saying some interesting things. So I myself will poke fun at John for not being able to split his attention, but I've seen people do it. Steve can do it, and I can't. So I missed kind of half of what he was saying to argue some points that I think needed defending in the live chat. So it was something about Abrahamic religions. What was the question?
Well, no, it's just something that Mac had said reminded me of the NIFB and specifically Stephen Anderson's claim that marriage means lifelong consent and that there's no such thing as spousal rape. And the broader issue of some Christians who use scripture to put forward the idea that women should be subservient and are essentially second-class citizens under Christianity.
I do that one.
Yeah, and also real quick too. Thank you, Nick, for being my live chat monkey. But anyway,
no problem. And I've got another one for you. So I do want to answer that one because that's actually one of the ones I hit on a lot. That's a decent amount of what I do, especially on Twitter. And because you saw it, a couple of those came out. But I do have to do another live chat. Biblical history skeptics again. Topic Thunder are of the same opinion with Augustine. I can guarantee. LOL. And I'm not entirely sure what that. But
yeah, he wasn't a big fan of the sex, old Augustine. So anything he's got to say on the matter is basically the cold shower of saints.
So I make it
real quick, Nick. Well, real quick, Nick. Wait, real quick before you go, Nick. I just want to take 1 minute because Great Skeptic said he's gonna be flying here in a few minutes. So before you go in depth, I just want to give you a minute, Mac. Tell us where people can find you, YouTube channel, other platforms. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I appreciate it. And like I said, I have about 10 more minutes, but my channel is Great Skeptic. You can find me on Twitter at Great Skeptic Mac, and you can also find me on Facebook as Mac Clark. And I also have another YouTube channel, as we mentioned earlier, that is the League of Extraordinary Atheists for Humanism, or Leah Podcast. So that's where you can find me. But I'll be
all right, awesome. And I just wanted to give you a chance to say all that because then that way, if we're in the midst of a conversation, you can just let yourself out. And we'll get his information and everybody else's in a pinned comment after this post is a video. Go ahead, Nick. Get in there with what you wanted to.
Thank you. So I am of the opinion that all Abrahamic religions oppress women, and they all of them relegate women to second-class citizen status. And so when people talk about Islam doing it, well, Islam got the idea from the Old Testament. They got the idea from the previous Islamic religions. Now, there are very good arguments to be made that Christianity boosted the stats, the over paganism, boosted the nature of and the status of women over paganism. That's fine. That doesn't mean they're not still second-class citizens. I don't care if it improves things. What I care about is what is the nature of women in society. And then I get told, well, in the eyes of God, women and men are equal. Well, that may or may not be true. There are certainly passages in the Bible to defend that and to make that position. Fine. I'm not talking about the eyes of God. I am talking about in society where we live right now, where are women? And the women are relegated to second-class status, and that is in every element of the Bible from the very beginning, where in Genesis, women are created as a helper for man. That's what the Bible says. There's nobody who refutes that. All the way through Paul, who says, what are the things actually now? And then biblical skeptic actually gave me some. I may not be entirely correct in who said what, so I can. But towards the end in Epiphanies, let's see. Women, submit yourselves unto your husbands as unto the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church. Let women learn in silence with all subjugation. I do not suffer a woman to teach. Let your women be kept in silence. For the man is not of the woman, but the woman of the man. Mm-hmm. Neither was the man created for the woman, but the woman for the man. And there's just verse after verse after verse everywhere, beginning to end. Now, yes, it says cherish your woman. That's fine. That's great. You can cherish a slave. There were plantation owners who cherished slaves, and they said, hey, this is, I love my, and if they lost a slave, they would be devastated. So what? Still a slave. And I get into this, and I've been literally having this argument for the last 3 days now. So it's funny that we're going into this stream, and there are people in the live chat who are like, is this all Nick does? No, if you've been watching this, I've done plenty of streams on other things, but one of the reasons John brought me in here is because this is one of the big ones I hit, and B, I happen to be doing it quite recently because of a couple memes I put out. But that you cherish your woman, that a woman is your woman, that a woman is equal in the eyes of God. All these things do not detract from the fact that the woman is subservient to the man. And then I get all sorts of, well, there's a reason you need to have order, and this is how. I don't care. I'm not talking about. I'm saying as a fact, women are subservient to men for the most part, certainly in all Abrahamic religions and virtually all of those sects. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing the lengths they'll go through to avoid actually saying that or excusing it. And if you want to excuse it, and if there are excuses, okay, fine, maybe. But then why don't you first admit it, and then let's have that discussion. And I find that a number of people have difficulty at least admitting it and first. And so I don't think it's avoidable in the Abrahamic religions. That's the status of women. And I haven't seen very many sects even that go around. There are some cropping up, thank God, but so to speak. But anyways, there you go. You all know the rest.
Amen.
When I spoke of the Bible earlier, I'm sure I'll probably be getting some interesting responses in the live chat regarding that. I don't consider it an important factor in why I don't believe in a creator God, Christian, whoever it is. I don't believe in any sort of deity at all, in any way, shape or form. So it might seem like a lot of atheists, especially in the Western sort of world, will pick on the Abrahamic religions in particular. I'm not. They just happen to be obviously some of the most prevalent. One of the reasons why, because the Bible is a piece of literature, it's a very interesting study when you consider how it was written, how many authors, blah blah blah. There's still so much nuance in certain areas. But if I may, from Genesis 3:16, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. Now, to somebody like myself who wasn't brought up religious, so I didn't have a constant Bible in my hand, that could be taught to mean a great many things from some people. To me, and again, pardon my vulgarity, but That's bullshit right there. And nothing could be more obvious to me than a pronouncement of, subjugation of women, and to not only to sort of say that you serve someone, but to say you're going to do so uncomfortably. And the problem I have with the Bible is that it wouldn't be so bad. Some people say, well, you've got to understand the cultural norms of the time. Fine, I can deal with that. The problem is that we do have people like this particular human from the NIFB who is proclaiming these things now. And but for the fact that he's obviously a bit of a crackpot, I don't want to sort of joke about mental illness if he does suffer from it in some aspect or not. But he has some pretty far out ideas that are essentially inspired from words and passages such as that. But he, what would it take? What essence of power or what aspect of control could he then muster to be able to put this into effect? That's the tipping point for me. We can sort of talk about the nuance of certain Bible passages or the livelong day. There's these people who are wanting to, sort of implement these ideas now. It may all be lip service. It may just be very passionate, sort of posturing and things. But it is dangerous. And he's getting it specifically from here. He's not, quoting Dawkins in this or quoting any other book. He's speaking specifically of the Bible. And I think it sort of frustrates me when you have some people who literally do only take the good parts of the Bible, fine, and not only deny the sort of negative aspects, but also that, whoever is reading those parts is reading it wrong. And you just think, my goodness, could it not be more clear, especially in certain passages like that? But then who is right? Who is taking the inerrant word of God correctly? And why couldn't he put a bloody guideline in there to follow? So it's one of those things where, these words are ancient, or, extremely old, archaic, but we've got people now who are looking to hang homosexual people. So it's got power still, definitely.
Let me interrupt, because I think there's a couple of us who are going to have to bail in about 5 minutes. So I don't know if that John wants to necessarily start to wrap it up, or if he's going to continue when both of us bail. But I think Gray and I are both going to be bailing in about 5 minutes. So I just wanted to give that.
It's me and Misha.
Okay. Well, can I do a historical thing on this? The Bible.
You better. That's why you're here.
Yeah.
Please do.
I was enjoying this.
Do it.
Now I have to do work. The Bible holds a unique position, if only because it's not a single subject book. Because it's a book of history, of genealogy, of cosmology, and especially of ethics, taken as a whole and dealt with, you're dealing with a book that holds an extra special place in, of course, the Jewish tradition, the Christian tradition, and the and to a much lesser extent the Islamic tradition. Mm-hmm. But when you're talking about very early Christianity, when you've got everybody who is becoming Christian either thinking of themselves as either Jewish or Gentile, mm-hmm. that group outside of the very insular Jewish group, we're also talking about that background of the Greek and Roman world, which were highly patriarchal, mm-hmm. highly hierarchical, in other words, organized in a very vertical fashion. And of course, women were just above slaves and children, barely, because slaves actually had monetary value. So you could argue a little bit about that. I mean, Greek women were, generally speaking, not even allowed at their husbands' funerals, because to be in public, women were not thought of as able to go out in public. In fact, if a Greek woman of any stature went out in public, she did so in robes that look a lot like burqas.
I was literally that's very patriarchal.
We are the weird ones in our century, in the 20th, beginning in the 19th, the 20th, and now the 21st century. We are the weird women for not wearing head coverings. Mm-hmm. You know, we're the ones going against several thousand years of trends. But getting back to the Greeks and the Romans, early Christianity, the very earliest part of Christianity during the Roman Empire, it was the women, the fairly wealthy women, who were supporting what was before the Christian church, supporting agape love feasts, where groups of people could get together, men, women, children, and slaves, in secret and reenact the Last Supper.
Just real quick, Misha. I just want to just pause there for 1 second. I just want to give Nick a moment to give his final thoughts and tell everybody where they can find him, because he as he said, he does have some family issues he needs to leave and take care of.
I thank you. Yeah, I think I probably should get going. So I'll do two or three things. Biblical history skeptics, again, another 5. So, some people don't know this. John is the mod. He is running this, but I am also a mod on Great Debate Community. So, on behalf, I can speak on behalf of the Great Debate Community, just as John can. And so, on behalf of that, thank you. That's really great that he's contributing that. But his chat super chat is John link biblical history skeptics 32 AD at Gmail, and just in case, I actually put that in the it looks like he wants to talk to you, so if he's going to pay $5 to talk to you, I'll link that into the live into our chat. So I have linked that, I've copied that into our chat so John can see that, and he has that. But thank you, biblical history skeptics. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter. That's what I publish under. Everybody calls me Nick. Please call me Nick. If calling anything else takes too long. I have a YouTube channel. I also have a website, nicholasLamarSoutter.com. I did a Trump rant for which I'm rather famous. You can find that on the website too. And by the way, there is some swearing going on, but when you're talking about certain people, it's actually really, I don't think it's I think it's required. I think you're not doing a service if you're not swearing, and I find Trump to be one of those people. So and I believe me, I swear a lot more than you do on that one. But so check that out. You can find that on my YouTube channel, Nicholas Lamar Soutter. Just plug that in. I'm there. I'm also the owner of the Humanist Codex, which is a website for social networking for humanists, atheists, and even for theists. We welcome theists. We have a chat group for polytheists, and we're coming out of sort of our second beta, but we also have arguments for atheists. So it's a resource for atheists. It's also a resource if you're starting to deconvert. We have stories of deconversions and people who have gone through it. It can be very, very, very difficult, and we sort of, I think there's a lot of atheists and anti-theists who think it's easy and everyone should just get out. No, we really try to be compassionate and understanding about it, and to encourage dialogue. So it's actually theatheistcodex.com. We rebranded, but you can find my work there, and you can find the Trump rant here on YouTube along with some other videos. So thank you very much for the opportunity, John.
All right, Nick, thank you so much. We love having you here. And great skeptic, any final words before you head out?
I just wanted to tell Nick it was nice to be in the chat with him. Finally, I've watched you on the Non Sequitur show before. You're really awesome. We'd love to have you on Leah sometime to talk about the Atheist Codex.
I would love to. Contact me either on Twitter. That's Nick Soutter at Twitter, or email. I'm easy to just plug me in my emails all over the internet, but I would love to. So awesome. Give me a shout out.
I'll contact you.
Thank
you.
Thank
you.
All right. Hey, thank you so much. And let yourselves out when you're ready. I think it's only fitting that we close this conversation with the two ladies, given the subject matter. and we're going to let Dr. Misha pick up where she left off. And after the fellas leave here, we will probably go another 15 minutes or so. I do have a family function that I said I would be to by 4 o'clock. I only have about 100 yards to walk to get to it. So, we'll go to and start wrapping things up about 9:45. So, Dr. Misha, please continue where you left off.
Sure.
Oh, go ahead. Yes, Matt. Yes,
I'm sorry. I'm not trying to cut you off, Misha. I promise, I swear. I am going to leave here in just a second, but I did want to throw a final thought in there before I left, which I think pertains to the conversation, kind of food for thought for everyone. If that's okay, I'll just take 2 minutes and then I will get out of everyone's hair.
Yes.
All right, so pertaining to just female rights and them being subservient and everything else that this kind of topic kind of covers, something that we haven't really touched base on yet is also how the topic doesn't really touch on what it does to LGBTQ right and their community as well, because if you're just supposed, if you're a female who's supposed to be subservient to a man, well, it doesn't say anything about any other kind of relationships, right? They really, it's a very narrow way to live your life. Like it's supposed to be man and woman, and then the woman's underneath, unless the man says she's on top. Whatever. Well, we won't go there. What I wanted to point out though is that I'm of the belief, if you will, that, well, I'm a humanist. I think every person is a person, right? And no matter who you want to love or however many people you want to love, as long as you are honest and you gain consent, it really doesn't matter. You can be with whoever and how many ever, as long as you and the people you are with consent to it and are honestly, truly fine to it. The biggest issue is lying assholes and suppressing people. So I kind of wanted to just get that thought out there before I ran off.
Yes, no problem. Very good point, and definitely related to this topic, especially since Stephen Anderson was brought up, and he has a lot of hateful ideas that need to experience a lot of pushback. All right, Dr. Misha, please pick up where you left off, and fellas, I'll say goodbye to you now, and I'm sure you'll disappear as you choose to. But again, very fitting that we are going to end with the women on the panel here for this discussion. Go ahead, Misha.
The point I wanted to make was basically this. In the very earliest pseudo-organization of the church, women were the ones that took the reins. They weren't necessarily the head of the church. There was no single head of the church. There were bishops, but it was very unorganized. The canon had not been established. The various doctrines and dogma were still a long way off. It was women who organized it. It was women who took real responsibility in running Christianity. Without them, I don't think it would have meant much. It would have disappeared like the Essenes into the caves and into the hills, and we wouldn't have heard from them anymore. It was the women that brought it into an urban setting. And it's going to be people like Paul who are going to talk against the women doing this, and it's going to be the later very early church fathers who are going to restructure the church in the image of the Roman patriarchal system that reorganizes in a vertical way. And so women get pushed out very early on. And in fact, they'll talk about women martyrs. And then later on in about the 11th or 12th century in Europe, we're going to see the Mary cult, the Virgin Mary cult. And whereas you can say, hey, a woman in prominence in the church. Well, number one, she's not leading the church. Number two, she has to fulfill very important and, dare I say it, rarefied aspects of womanhood. She has to have given birth to a divine being and also be a virgin at the same time. Not many of us are going to live up to those standards. And so the frustration with Steven Anderson is that he is looking at a older organization of Christianity, not very early Christianity. And I think that's part of the pain that we feel, is that it could have been different. Mm-hmm. It could have been something so much more inclusive. And instead it becomes a boys only club, until you get the Reformation. And then a handful of those groups, the Hussites, the Moravian Brethren, and a few of the offshoots consider women to be something of equals in the church. But that's 1,500 years later.
Well, and it's important for me to point out too, is that Steven Anderson and his organization, the NAFB, is certainly not an indictment of Christianity as a whole. And that organization is experiencing blowback from other Christians. I mean, I often have said that, I am an atheist, but everyone within my sphere of influence in the real world, all the people I love are all theists. So, I am definitely not an anti-theist, and we don't want, and that's actually an unfortunate part of this situation. You have someone like Steven Anderson out there and getting press because of the heinous things he says, and allows people to draw the conclusion that perhaps all Christians are just as evil and heinous as he is. And of course, that's certainly not the fact.
Well, I grew up in a Methodist tradition. I grew up in a very mainstream, moderate church, and we were far more worried about protesting against the Vietnam War and raising money for the Heifer projects than we were I didn't know about evangelicals and fundamentalists until I got into college and started meeting, a lot of other people. So Anderson is alien to me. He truly is.
Mm-hmm. I think the fact that they are so bold in their sort of beliefs and what they're willing to put across, and how they are taking, certain aspects of biblical scripture and things like that and pushing them forward. We could obviously put them in the position that they're taking it from the Bible, therefore Bible bad, and all the charity and all the good things. But I think it is a shame, because I often say this with Mac. We often talk about things where there must be a lot of people who are practicing Christians, who aren't necessarily evangelical or belong to a particular denomination that is very strict and very stringent on things, and are lovely people. My next door neighbours are religious, go to church every Sunday, but that's pretty much it. They don't sort of come to our door or anything like that, but they, you've got to take these things almost on an individual case, where you can't blame everyone for the actions of a few. It just, unfortunately, they do take from the good book as some of their, sort of ideas and stuff. So I think it is very easy. We do it, like you were saying about the niqab, the burqa and the hijab. They are a symbol of something that in the West, obviously, we've come to fear aspects of it, in terms of the fact that it appears to be female subjugation, and depending on who you talk to, it is or it isn't. Other aspects are, signs of a culture so alien to sort of Western ideals. But it's a symbol. It's something that you can look at and either have a positive reaction or a negative reaction to it. And with the NIFB, they are the sort of the bad eggs, as it were. But it's not to say that they shouldn't be concentrated on, because if they feel free enough to be able to have these beliefs in a country that's as progressive as the US, they have but to grow. And I don't think they'll ever become the majority, but it's it's very telling that they feel so emboldened by being able to do this. They're getting a heck of a lot of pushback, of course, which is very heartening.
Hey, real quick, I hate to jump in, but I just discovered that for some reason I had my laptop plugged in, and for some reason it is not charging, because I try and stay ahead of the charge while I'm doing the stream. And so my laptop is going to go dead here, toot sweet. So unfortunately, we're going to have to start wrapping this up before we just go to dead air mid-sentence or something. So if we'll start with Dr. Misha, if you'd like to give your final thoughts on this and let folks know where they can find you.
My final thought is basically education is our answer. Educating people that some things are not right, educating people that they can walk away from this sort of thing. People can get away from Stephen Anderson's church. And once I think that we keep up the pressure and keep telling these people, hey, this isn't the only way, and hey, this is really doing harm to people, fingers crossed we can get to the point in our lives where there is a certain amount of respect and equality. I grew up in a world, I'm old enough to remember I could not wear pants to school unless it was snowing. I mean, we had dress codes, different dress codes for young men and young women. That's changing. I think of myself as a second wave feminist. So many attitudes are changing now that I can hope we can keep this moving. If people want to find me, I'm on Twitter at 3M Griffith, and they can get a hold of me there. My husband and I, Jerry and I, have a channel called Useless History that we are putting out videos, not as often as we would like, but we've been really, really busy, and we've hopefully are going to be putting out a video soon. But I want to thank everybody for being here. And thank Kelly for her points.
Yes, and thank you so much, Misha. We love having you here. You always bring a lot to the table. And Kelly, please give your final thoughts and tell people where they can find you.
Yes, well, as you mentioned earlier, Topic Thunder is my channel on YouTube. Just make sure you click Topic Thunder rather than Tropic Thunder, and Topic Thunder 1 on Twitter. But yeah, my final thoughts are, female subjugation in any forms is obviously is very prevalent. My understanding of it is that it's not necessarily always in far off lands, and it would only take a certain amount of pressure and particular no sort of force in order to sort of keep an eye on these things before it's at your back door, as we've seen in the FGM cases. They are prevalent in the West, those particular things. So any sort of expression of religious freedoms that have the ability to cause harm aren't just happening abroad, they're happening, right around the corner from you possibly. So whilst there is sort of the idea that, we've come forward in some ways, let's just keep an eye on this sort of thing and do what we can to raise awareness. Like Misha said, education is definitely the key. If it is a cultural issue, then try to understand it and try not to clash with those with different understanding to you. And that's the only way we're going to move forward and to get a balance and true equality throughout the world. So hopefully, this video will enlighten some people to some of the issues. They're not easy to look at, but the skeptic community does love a challenge. So if we can help in any way, then we should do that.
And again, that's Topic Thunder. Thank you, live chat, for getting her over 200 subs today. Let's keep going. Her content is greatly worthwhile. And I trust me, you go over and watch some of her videos, you will enjoy yourselves, and you just might learn something. I want to thank all the panelists that joined us today. Everybody's information will be put in a pinned comment below the video in the comment section. And again, a reminder, next week, our feature channel will be LEA, League of Extraordinary Atheists who are for humanism. Yes, that's it. Yes. And also, we will try and put Topic Thunder together with Chris from Biblical History Skeptics. Always want to thank Steve for allowing me to do this on his channel. Please, share, like, and subscribe this video. And I always like to end every stream with a quote. And this one is maybe not completely coincide with the topic, but it's a quote from one of my favorite women in history. And let's, given the topic, let's end on a bit of misandry. If you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman. Margaret Thatcher.
Oh, John, that's not very egalitarian of you.
So good afternoon, everybody, and we will be back next week.
Thank you, John.